September 2, 1945, Tokyo Bay. Gray morning mist curls across the still waters as the battleship USS Missouri lies anchored like a floating fortress. On her teak deck, Japanese envoys somber in dark coats step forward to sign the surrender that will end the most destructive war in human history. Above them, a deep rumble builds in the sky. Hundreds of B-29 Superfortresses roar in perfect formation, their silver wings flashing in the sunlight. Engines thunder so loudly that they drown out the speeches below. The message is unmistakable. The weapon that burned Japan's cities to ashes and brought an empire to its knees. B-29 Superfortresses, these giants of the air, turned vibrant cities into smoking rubble, killing hundreds of thousands and collapsing an entire industrial economy. For 9 relentless months, these giants had turned Japan into a nation of fire and chaos. From Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, they struck night after night, incinerating Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, Kobe, Yokohama, and dozens of other cities, where firestorms howled like hurricanes and winds so fierce they boiled rivers and ripped roofs into the sky. They mined harbors, smashed railways, and burned power plants, strangling food and fuel until millions faced starvation. Whole villages waved white flags long before the first atomic bomb was ever dropped. From the desperate Operation Matterhorn raids out of China and India, through the massive Marianas Offensive, to General Curtis LeMay's ruthless low-altitude firebombing strategy, the B-29 campaign broke Japan's ability. It will fight, proving that a nation could be defeated from the sky alone before the world had even heard the word Hiroshima. This is the untold story of how the superfortress bombed Japan into submission, reshaping both modern warfare and the meaning of victory. The story of the B-29's air war over Japan truly begins in the spring of 1944, far from Tokyo. The plan was called Operation Matterhorn, a bold but logistically punishing strategy to strike the Japanese homeland long before American forces had secured closer island bases. The superfortresses were first staged in India, near Calcutta, then ferried supplies over the towering Himalayas to forward bases near Chengdu, China. Every gallon of fuel, every bomb, and even the food for the crews had to be flown in across the infamous hump, one of the world's most dangerous air routes. At the time, no other heavy bomber force in history had attempted anything so ambitious. The first major combat test came on June 15, 1944, when 63 B-29s thundered through the night toward the Imperial Steelworks at Yawata on Kyushu. Radar screens in Japan flickered to life as air raid sirens wailed, marking the first time the home islands had been struck by land-based bombers. But the mission proved how fragile the plan was. Bad weather scattered formations, and only a handful of crews bombed visually. The rest dropped their loads by radar with limited effect. 6 aircraft were lost, and dozens barely limped back to Chinese airstrips low on fuel. Over the next weeks, the XX Bomber Command kept pressing, hitting Manchurian steel plants, docks at Nagasaki, and oil refineries in Sumatra. Fierce summer monsoons, supply shortages, and mechanical failures turned every sortie into a trial. B-29 crews braved thunderstorms that iced wings and flung aircraft across the sky. Some planes ditched at sea, others crash-landed on remote fields in China. Yet each strike carried a strategic weight Japan could not ignore. For the first time, its industrial core was within reach of regular American bombing. Matterhorn never delivered decisive physical damage, but it accomplished something almost as important. It proved the B-29 concept that these giant, high-altitude bombers could span oceans and deliver heavy payloads with unprecedented precision. And it laid the groundwork for a far more devastating phase to come, once American Marines captured islands close enough to unleash the superfortress in full force. By mid-1944, U.S. forces seized a game-changing foothold, the Mariana Islands, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, stretching like stepping stones across the Pacific. These volcanic outposts were close enough to put every major Japanese city within reach of the B-29. For the first time, the giant bombers could fly round-trip missions without the brutal supply nightmare of China. Within weeks of the battles for Saipan and Tinian, runways longer than anything in the world were carved from coral and jungle. The bases bristled with fuel depots, bomb storage, and maintenance hangars built solely for the superfortress. Each airfield became a small city of metal, steel, and restless aircrews. When the first B-29s rolled across these runways in late 1944, the war's center of gravity shifted. Their opening blow targeted Tokyo's aircraft industry. On November 24, 1944, 111 B-29s lifted off at dawn, silver fuselages gleaming as they climbed into the icy upper winds. General Emmett Rosie O'Donnell led the strike toward the Nakajima engine works near Tokyo. Jetstream gales of over 200 miles per hour scattered formations and froze oxygen masks solid. Still, 24 bombers punched through and dropped their loads, sending fire and smoke rising above the world's largest city. The physical damage was modest, but the psychological impact was electric. Japan's capital had been bombed in daylight by land-based American aircraft. Over the next 2 months, the B-29 offensive widened. Raids hammered Nagoya, Osaka, and the steel plants of Kyushu, forcing factories underground and stretching Japan's air defenses to breaking. Yet precision bombing from 30,000 feet was costly. Arctic air masses bred towering storms, jet stream winds scattered bombs. Many missions ended with bomb loads missed and bombers riddled by flak or fighter attacks. Loss rates climbed, while results remained limited. This tactical stalemate set the stage for a new commander, one who would rewrite the rules of aerial warfare. When Major General Curtis LeMay arrived to take command of 21st Bomber Command in January 1945, he carried a single, radical idea. If high-altitude precision couldn't crush Japan, fire itself would. When Major General Curtis LeMay assumed command of 21st Bomber Command in early 1945, he inherited a formidable fleet of B-29s but disappointing results. Precision bombing from high altitude wasn't breaking Japan's war machine. Winter jet streams scattered bombs miles off target, and flak and fighters still took their toll. LeMay, famous for his cold efficiency and nicknamed Old Iron Ass, decided that if pinpoint attacks failed, he would burn Japan's cities to the ground. LeMay's shift was as audacious as it was brutal. He ordered bombers stripped of most defensive guns to lighten their loads and fly at night and at low altitudes between 5,000 and 9,000 feet, where Japanese radar and anti-aircraft fire were weaker. This allowed each B-29 to carry nearly double the incendiary payload. The lead squadrons would drop napalm-filled Pathfinder bombs to ignite the first blazes, while the main force followed with M69 incendiaries. Each canister packed with small jellied gasoline bombs designed to cling to wood and burn hotter than anything before. On the evening of March 9, 1945, the plan was tested over Tokyo. One by one, 334 superfortresses rumbled off the runways at Saipan and Tinian, forming a 3-hour airborne procession across the Pacific. Over the capital, skies were clear, and a steady wind blew from the southwest, perfect for feeding a firestorm. The first Pathfinder squadrons painted an X of flame across the city. Then wave after wave of bombers followed, releasing their cargo in rapid succession. Within minutes, entire neighborhoods ignited like dry grass. Winds intensified into a fire tornado that roared through Tokyo's dense wooden districts, lifting roofs and hurling burning debris blocks away. Heat became so fierce that canals boiled and the air itself seared lungs. Tens of thousands of civilians were trapped in a hell of flame and smoke, many drowned while trying to escape in rivers and moats. The attack killed an estimated 100,000 people in a single night, making it deadlier than either atomic bombs to come. LeMay watched the reports and saw his strategy vindicated. Losses were lighter than on many high-altitude raids, and the devastation was beyond anything previously achieved. Tokyo's core industries lay in ash. To LeMay, the lesson was clear. Firebombing, not precision strikes, would end the war. The flames of Tokyo were only the beginning. 2 nights later, on March 11, 1945, LeMay sent 313 B-29s toward Nagoya, a major industrial hub. Although 285 aircraft reached the city, lighter winds kept the firestorm from matching Tokyo's horror. Still, whole districts burned, factories were gutted, and thousands were left homeless. Barely had the smoke settled when, on March 13, another massive strike lifted off 301 bombers bound for Osaka, Japan's commercial heart. Heavy cloud cover forced crews to bomb by radar, but paradoxically, that tighter pattern helped flames concentrate. In a single night, 8 square miles of Osaka vanished, including its core business and industrial quarters. Survivors described a deafening roar as fires converged into a single rolling wall of heat that consumed entire neighborhoods. Next came Kobe on March 16, where shipyards and steel mills fed Japan's naval power. This time, crews combined precision bombing of docks with incendiaries aimed at worker housing. By dawn, 1/4 of the city lay in ruins, choking the waterfront in black smoke. LeMay's relentless rhythm continued through spring. Nagoya was hit again and again, each time losing more of its aircraft factories. Yokohama, Kawasaki, and dozens of smaller cities followed, each raid a carefully planned blaze meant to erase industrial output and crush morale. By May and June, entire regions were blackened wastelands. Over 500 B-29s sometimes launched in a single mission, their combined payloads exceeding anything dropped in Europe. The numbers were staggering. Japan's 6 largest cities were left more than half destroyed. Millions were homeless. Water, power, and transport collapsed. Pilots reported seeing coastlines glowing from 100 miles away. The strategy worked with chilling precision. Japan's industrial production plunged, and a desperate government struggled to find food for its people. While naval blockades tightened the noose from the sea, LeMay's air fleet turned the skies into a weapon of slow starvation and constant terror. What had begun as a bold gamble in Tokyo became a systematic campaign to burn an entire nation into submission. By early summer 1945, the B-29 campaign had reached a scale no nation had ever faced. From Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, waves of up to 500 superfortresses roared off nightly, their combined payloads measured in thousands of tons. Below, Japanese cities lay shattered, Tokyo's heart reduced to ashes, Osaka and Nagoya gutted, Kobe and Yokohama flattened. Entire regions glowed red from the air. The impact went far beyond burned factories. Japan's transport and food networks collapsed. Railways warped under heat, ports lay silent, and warehouses stood empty. Farmers could not move rice and vegetables into the cities, and millions faced the threat of starvation. U.S. aircraft scattered millions of warning leaflets urging civilians to flee, adding psychological torment to physical ruin. In June, LeMay unleashed Phase 2 of the urban bombing campaign. Cities surrounding Tokyo Bay, Yokosuka, Chiba, and others were incinerated one after another. The destruction was so complete that reconnaissance crews sometimes struggled to find recognizable landmarks to photograph. By mid-June, Japan's 6 largest cities were half destroyed or worse, and countless smaller towns were burning in turn. At sea, the U.S. Navy tightened a blockade that strangled what little trade remained. From newly captured Okinawa, B-24 Liberators and B-25 Mitchells joined the devastation, while Navy carrier groups and P-51 fighters from Iwo Jima swept the skies clear. No factory, dock, or power plant was safe. Inside the Japanese government, panic spread. Food stocks dwindled, and the ability to arm new troops simply vanished. Reports from Kyushu told of white flags appearing in villages, a sign that ordinary people no longer believed victory or even survival was possible. On July 26, the Allies issued the Potsdam Declaration, demanding unconditional surrender. While hardliners hesitated over the emperor's fate, moderates understood the war was lost. Long before Hiroshima, Japan was economically and psychologically crushed, its capacity to resist already broken under the relentless rain of fire from the B-29s. When the Enola Gay released the first atomic bomb over Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, a blinding white flash and a rising mushroom cloud shocked the world. 3 days later, Nagasaki endured the same fate. For generations afterward, these 2 moments have been etched into history as the decisive reason Japan surrendered. Yet the reality on the ground in Japan was far more complex and in many ways already decided. Long before the atomic strikes, Japan's major cities were smoking ruins. Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, Kobe, Yokohama each lay half or more destroyed. Industrial output had collapsed. Transport systems were wrecked. Millions were homeless, and food shipments had fallen so sharply that famine loomed. American B-29 crews, dropping millions of leaflets, warned of even worse to come, and Japanese civilians knew starvation was no bluff. Crucially, news of the atomic bombings spread slowly and incompletely. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were far from the capital, and poor communications left many Japanese only vaguely aware of a new weapon. Government leaders understood the devastation, but not its full meaning. In fact, many in Tokyo believed the new bombs were merely larger versions of the fire rates they had already endured. Meanwhile, Curtis LeMay's massive firebombing campaign and naval blockade continued to strangle the nation. In the 2 weeks between Hiroshima and Japan's surrender, B-29s and U.S. Navy aircraft burned more cities and cut off what little remained of the country's supply lines. Inside Japan's war cabinet, the decisive argument was not fear of a single bomb, but the certainty of national collapse. No fuel, no food, no factories, no way to defend the home islands from an invasion scheduled for November. On August 14, Emperor Hirohito addressed his people for the first time, announcing surrender, while the atomic bombings accelerated diplomacy and shocked the outside world. The country had already been bombed into submission by months of relentless B-29 firestorms and an air-sea blockade that made survival impossible. When the ink dried on Japan's surrender aboard the USS Missouri on September 2, 1945, the world officially left behind 6 years of global war. But high above Tokyo Bay, the true architects of Japan's collapse had already made their statement. B-29 Superfortresses thundered in perfect formation over the ceremony, engines echoing across the water like a final verdict. From the first difficult raids of Operation Matterhorn to the nightmarish firestorms of Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, and countless other cities, these silver giants redefined the power of air warfare. Their long-range endurance, immense bomb loads, and ability to operate in coordinated waves turned the skies into a decisive battlefield, one that bypassed trenches and fleets to strike directly at the heart of a nation's economy and morale. The B-29 campaign also ushered in a new, unsettling era. By making entire cities the target, it blurred the line between combatant and civilian more than any weapon before it. Historians still debate its morality. Were the firebombings and the mass civilian deaths a tragic necessity to end a brutal war, or the opening act of modern total war? The answer remains complicated, but the outcome is clear. Long before the world heard the words atomic bomb, Japan's will to fight had been shattered. Its factories lay in ashes, its people faced famine, and its leaders saw no path to survival. The B-29 Superfortress, more than any single weapon, forced the land of the rising sun to bow. Today, the thunder of those engines is silent, but the lesson endures. Air power, once a supporting force, had become a war-ending instrument on its own. The Superfortress proved that the sky itself could decide the fate of nations, a reality that would shape every conflict of the nuclear age.